first, we're going to start with the United States women's national team versus South Korea. They're going to be playing. It's the Midwest tour, Lisa. And these matches in October are going to be taking place in the Midwest as well. This first one coming up is going to be at Kansas City at the Children's Mercy Park. Thursday at 8 p.m. ET kickoff time. Let's get into the roster a little bit, Lisa, in terms of this preview and what we're looking at. These four matches, these are the later two now. These were sort of billed as the kind of Olympic tour matches, post-Olympic matches for these Olympians after they won the bronze medal in the Tokyo Games. And now in this October international window, it's the final two matches that are also sort of adjacent, being billed as the Carli Lloyd farewell matches. Carli Lloyd announcing her retirement post Tokyo Olympics, had 2 games in September against Paraguay. Now these final 2 against South Korea. Sat down for an interview with us, Lisa. She talked about how emotional things were going to be. And now here we are. We're going to be bearing witness to the final 2 games. Let's take a look at who else is joining Carli Lloyd in these matches. It's the goalkeepers. They've got Jane Campbell and Adriana Franch. Defenders are Abby Dahlkemper, Tierna Davidson, Emily Fox, Casey Kruger, Kelly O'Hara, Becky Sauerbrunn, and Emily Sonnet. For the midfield crew, it's going to be Lindsay Horan, Rose Lavelle, Katerina Macario, Christen Mewis, and Andi Sullivan. And the forwards are Tobin Heath, Carli Lloyd, Alex Morgan, Mallory Pugh, Meghan Rapinoe, Sophia Smith, and Lynn Williams. 21 players on this roster, Lisa, 17 of them representing that Olympic squad from the Tokyo Games. And we've still got the small handful of NWSL players who are going to be representing alongside them as well. And that also now includes Emily Fox, who wasn't part of those September friendlies, but is now included in this mix alongside Andi Sullivan, Mel Pugh, and Sophia Smith.
I think that's the biggest thing when this roster was announced a week or so ago. And now as we preview this first match that the U.S. has against South Korea is Emily Fox is on this roster. She has 4 caps at the senior level. Starting in 2018, she has a few in 2019. And then in 2021, I think she played in the She Believes Cup. So she's been at this level. And it's great that Vlatko Andonovski is giving her another look. I think it's also important to note that Meghan Rapinoe is back. She did not play in the 2 matches against Paraguay earlier in September. And also Christen Press has opted out again, as well as Crystal Dunn, who did play in the 2 matches in September. And now she has opted out. And just because of roster rotation and things like that, now Emily Fox is sliding into that defensive role that Crystal Dunn plays. I'm really pumped for Emily Fox. And now with Emily Fox joining this team from Racing Louisville, all 10 NWSL teams are represented on this roster for the U.S. right now. Sandra, that says so much about the competition and the level of skill and play in the NWSL, that every single team is represented at the highest level that the U.S. has to offer right now for women. That's pretty cool.
I love to see it. You love to see it. I think everybody loves to see it. We can't emphasize the importance of the league for American women's domestic soccer here in the United States. That's what it is. That's what it was founded on. One of the core principles of having a league in the United States was to ensure that there was always going to be a place for the current players in existence to continue their development and to continue cultivating and growing and nurturing future talent for this international level. And Emily Fox getting back into the mix might be surprising to some, maybe not surprising to others. This was a player drafted number 1 out of college from UNC, had already had a few caps or at least some time with a few camps, with the women's national team. So not unfamiliar with being in these types of situations in terms of what to expect from a national women's team camp, the routine, the scheduling, the day-to-day. So having an extra defender in the mix, obviously in light of having somebody like Crystal Dunn opting out for these 2 matches, just sort of kind of seemed like it made the most logical sense in the present time. So I know we've been talking a lot about, and we'll talk a lot about it some more, that we'll probably see a much bigger camp and a bigger mix up of things come those January camps. But to see this now and this sort of final stretch of international windows in 2021, coupled with the fact that these are the post-Olympic celebratory games and also Carli Lloyd's farewell, this just sort of seemed like the next logical fit. But I love that it is someone who is familiar with this national team for a little bit, that it's also a young player that is still getting familiar with things. And like you said, Lisa, that it's going to make all 10 clubs represented at the international window here. It's going to be very, very exciting for sure. Do you think Emily Fox might be tagged with a start? We saw when the September windows matches happened against Paraguay, we saw Mallory Pugh, we saw Sophia Smith, we saw Andi Williams get out there, get minutes, get starts, and really make an impact in these games against Paraguay. We're talking about Mallory Pugh and Andi Sullivan having big games. Mal Pugh racking up assists. Andi Sullivan recording her first international goals with the U.S. women's national team. And then Sophia Smith saying, hey, me too. Let me get in on this. So she went ahead and earned her first international goals with the United States women's national team as well. So I don't know. I'm wondering if maybe somebody like Emily Fox can get a little bit of time in these type of matches. What do you think?
I think we could. Unfortunately, I don't have a bird's eye view of the trainings that are happening right now for Vlatko Andonovski and the squads, because I think the trainings leading up to these matches really determine who's going to get the start and who's not. I don't think she'll start the first game, but I think depending on how she does, I think she'll get time for sure. And I could see her being dubbed to start in the second match against South Korea next week. But I don't think she'll get the first start in this week, especially because it's a defensive position that she plays. And although she is very good at it, and she wouldn't be called onto this roster if she didn't deserve to play there, but defensive position is also a position that you can't really afford to be making that many mistakes there. Whereas a forward, you have a little bit more freedom to take more risks and try different things out, try new moves and new positions and new players farther up the field, as it's less dangerous when they lose the ball. So I don't think the first game, but maybe the second one. And I also think that this is huge because this game is being played at Children's Mercy Park in Kansas City, and that is home to AD Franch. And although she's been traded from Portland to KC, so she plays in the area a lot, I don't believe she's played at Children's Mercy Park yet. Every game that KC NWSL has played has been at Legends Field since Franch has been there. So now she gets to play at Children's Mercy Park, and she gets to play in front of her home family crowd for her country. So that's a defensive part of the line. So maybe that changes how things goes a little bit ahead of her. But do you think Fox will get the start?
I'm with you. I don't know if it's a start, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we see some minutes for this player. I honestly, I think Crystal Dunn opting out of these particular matches are going to be a bit of a blessing, honestly, because I know that Crystal Dunn has been this type of team player for this national team, that she's such a baller that it almost doesn't matter where you put her on the field. You know that she's absolutely going to make an impact for her team. And what we saw happen was that ended up looking like her moving further and further back towards the pitch, and she was at the outside back position, and she's been there in this run during the 2019 Olympics, or excuse me, during the 2019 World Cup, and now during the 2020/21 Tokyo Summer Games. So that's where we've seen her. And that's really been her position. There hasn't been a lot of competition in terms of someone coming in and really making a statement in that role. When we saw that Olympic roster drop, and then we saw it get expanded to a full 22 player roster versus just alternates, it all sort of started to click for a lot of us. And it's like, hey, this makes a lot of sense. Like, you've got a player in Emily Sonnet where you're not too sure where you're going to put her. Maybe she slots in at outside back. Maybe she slots in at center back. Who knows? That's a wild card there. But then they saw somebody like Casey Kruger, where it was just kind of like, yes, this is an outside back. You can put her at left back. She can either get involved in the attack, or if you want her in a narrow situation to defend 1v1, she's great to have in there, right? So those kind of things made sense. So for Dunn opting out of this one, I think maybe we're gonna have to be forced to see some different looks. So who knows if we're going to see Emily Fox get the start or possibly just get some minutes, or somebody like a Tierna Davidson as well. We have really liked seeing what she's been putting together in terms of her performances in the center back position. Absolutely. I would like to see that that development continue. But we have seen Tierna Davidson in sort of a fourth option off the bench type of scenario come in and have to slot in at a wide position. So we'll see how this looks with just the one veteran and Kelly O'Hara, and then these other options at outside back, and what that looks like in these two games.
When we look at this roster and knowing that the NWSL season is nearing the end, just a few more games left in the regular season and then playoffs hit, and you look at all 10 teams being represented here on this roster, do you think that plays a factor into the minutes that will be played for these players? For instance, Jane Campbell, Abby Dahlkemper, Houston Dash players that are still pushing for a playoff spot. Gotham FC, they have Carli Lloyd, of course, who I'm sure this is her farewell tour. She'll get many minutes, if not starts in both of these matches. But when you look at this and North Carolina with Lynn Williams, do you think that the NWSL playoffs that are just around the corner and the championship that these players are vying for play a factor into the minutes that will be played at the international level?
Oh man, I'm going to say possibly. And I'm going to say it's definitely something to keep an eye on, especially considering, Vlatko Andonovski, the head coach, who's making these decisions and calling these kind of non-Olympian players into the fold. So there's the 17 players who represented in Tokyo, and then this handful of players who did not. So unless they are players from the Portland Thorns, Owell Reign, or Washington Spirit, they've clinched, right? So they're not going to return to that one final game. For many of these teams, it's just one final game remaining in the NWSL regular season. Unless you're Gotham, you don't have games, plural, in the regular season. So unless you're one of those three teams, you've already clinched, and it's now just a matter of seeing where the seeding lies and who's going to be facing off against who. But Vlatko Andonovski echoed something similar that I'm going to just reemphasize here, and that bringing in those type of players at the time for the September camps was because of their very strong performances for club and the playoff push that they were in as well. These were players that were performing very, very well for their teams, whether it was an Andi Sullivan, Sophia Smith, or Mallory Pugh, and to bring them in because they also had some familiarity with the national team camp and how they do things there as well. So in terms of minutes restrictions and stuff like that, that was something that Andonovski said that they were going to keep an eye on during those September matches. We ended up seeing a couple of these players get significant minutes, heavy minutes, consecutive starts in some cases. And I'm not too sure if that's going to echo similarly here in these October friendlies. Possibly. I'm not going to say that they won't, but these are the final two games of Carli Lloyd's career as well. I mean, I won't be surprised if maybe she's going to really want to try to push a full 90 in each one. And I wouldn't be surprised if she commits to that and does it, because she still sort of has that engine and drive in her still. But I would like to see some rotation for sure happen for any of these teams that are in the playoff mix. And there's a ton of them, honestly. So if they end up getting extended minutes and they still have some extra things on the line in terms of the playoff push and the seeding and or possibly needing to go that extra mile to clinch, they're going to probably get right back into it once they head over to NWSL. These are professional athletes. It's very easy to say and say like, oh, like they're people and they're tired and they're human. Yeah, of course. But this is also their jobs. And this is also like what they have been called to do. So we have seen these players specifically. They're just kind of built different, and they're just sort of, their mentality is just sort of different. And that kind of, I think, is what separates them from the fold of the rest of their players. That, they're going to go on an international window and probably get some extended minutes. And guess what? They're going to head on right back to their club and get back to it again as well.
I mean, you say built differently. Carli Lloyd is 39 years old. She's broken numerous records for club and country. She's at 314 caps right now. If she plays these next two, that'll be 316, ending her career at those caps. And no one's forcing her out, except she's choosing to retire. So these players having a different mentality. I mean, Carli Lloyd is like your number one example. And for her, so she could end with 316 caps after these next two matches. She is number 2 right now in all-time caps for the United States women's national team. She's behind Christen Lilly, who she will not catch up to, who has 354. And then in goals scored at the international level, she is number 3 right now. She's behind Abby Wambach and Mia Hamm, and then it's Carli Lloyd. So Mia Hamm, who is ahead of her, is at 158, and Carli Lloyd is at 134. We saw her jump the standings from, I think, 5 to number 3 in these September friendly matches that the U.S. played. She scored 6 goals in those 2 matches, 5 in 1 game. So yeah, 5 goals in 1 game for Carli Lloyd. Yes. Are we putting money on it, Sandra? Like, she's trying to break records here before she retires.
Who knows? Maybe off camera, maybe off mic. We'll talk about it some more. But turns out there's still records to be had or ones to be broken. So we'll see if that happens. I don't know if that is gonna if that type of match is gonna echo similarly to a team like South Korea. Again, this is not a team that. This is another team that the United States is going up against where they have not met often or as frequent as maybe some other teams. But in terms of comparing recent opposition, in terms of where a team like South Korea is at versus Paraguay, I think they're just 2 tactically different teams. This is the South Korea side that's probably going to rely a little bit more on possession, try to force the United States to wrangle the ball away from them. Smart and patient on the ball, very tactical, savvy team. So I'm curious to see what type of adjustments, if any, are made or what type of challenges are presented to this United States women's national team. I'm not too sure if we're going to see these types of like 9-0 blowout games against these matches and against this team in particular. And I'm gonna be looking forward to seeing how it plays out. I know you are too, Lisa. For everybody who's wondering, we are going to be providing continuing coverage of these final October friendlies for you all. Attacking Third will be going live with post-game reaction to these matches after the final whistle. So look out and follow us on our social media channels for whenever we go live. Again, head on over to the YouTube and subscribe, and you won't miss a thing in terms of notifications when we go live.